Harry kept his eyes closed as they travelled. He half hoped that he was wrong and he would land outside of the maze to the thunderous sound of applause, and a lot of consternation from anyone who didn't happen to favour Hogwarts. Sure, that would mean that he had no idea what was going on and Voldemort could do worse, but at least then he might manage to face Voldemort without anyone else insisting on accompanying him. He did have the best track record in dealing with the self-proclaimed Dark Lord, after all, save perhaps Dumbledore. When Harry opened his eyes, though, he was disappointed to find that he was, once again, lying in a cemetery near the Riddle family plot. A quick glance around showed no one else in sight, so Fred and Cedric were still under the cloak and Voldemort and his non-marauder accomplice would be further away, giving them some time. Muffliato. You guys there? Harry asked quietly. Yeah, Fred whispered back. I can't believe you were actually right. It does happen, Harry acknowledged. How about you, Cedric? I think I'm having a panic attack from all of your conditioning this year, Cedric answered honestly. Running would be a great idea, but it would be a bit difficult with two people under the invisibility cloak. Still, you need to get out of the way, Harry told them. What's going on, Harry? Fred demanded. We don't have time, I'll explain later. Remember, you need to kill the giant snake. Be very careful with those daggers as I coated them in basilisk venom, and no, I'm not going to explain why now. At some point it will probably look like I'm dead, but if the person who killed me collapses as well, I'll be fine. If not, just grab the portkey and go. If you have to, silence yourselves. Do you understand? Harry swore as a possible flaw in his plan occurred to him. What? Cedric asked, sounding a little anxious. We have brother wands. I'll need to switch wands with one of you or I won't be able to do a thing, Harry explained. Here, Cedric offered, holding out his wand. It was a little surreal to see a wand appear out of nowhere and floating in midair. It won't work as well as your wand since it didn't choose you or whatever, but at least it doesn't have an unfortunate connection to whoever it is you're going to be facing. Thanks, Cedric, Harry said gratefully, accepting the wand. Ashwood with unicorn hair, if he remembered correctly. It was maybe an inch and a half longer than his. He held his own wand out for Cedric to take. Please try not to die. You too, Fred. You're awfully morbid, tonight, Fred noted. It's beginning to scare me. Harry shrugged. Yeah, well, this could all go to hell really quickly. Remember, you're not here, so don't draw attention to yourselves if you can help it. Got it, Cedric said. You sure about this? Harry shook his head. Not nearly, but we're kind of a little late for second guessing. You don't die either, Harry, Fred said seriously. Because let me tell you that if I let you die, my family, well, I'd probably be better off throwing myself between you and an Avada Kedavra. I'll try not to, Harry promised. Let's go, Cedric said. Harry waited until he was fairly certain that his friends were not in his general area anymore before cancelling the Muffliato. Oh God, he cried immediately, jumping to his feet. A graveyard. They never told us there was another part of the third task. That's because there isn't, a voice said from behind him. Harry turned around to see who it was. He could just vaguely recognize him, whoever it was, but God help him he didn't know who it was. Stupefy. Harry opened his eyes slowly and took stock of his surroundings. He was tied to a grave, which was not good. The fair-haired man who'd stunned him was standing in front of a large stone cauldron while a giant snake slithered around, and Voldemort, who was currently resembling a very ugly baby, was lying next to the cauldron. That was surprisingly a good thing, but Harry hoped that Nagini wouldn't either take notice of or see fit to inform Voldemort of Fred and Cedric's presence. I activated the dark mark and called your Death Eaters, my lord, the strangely familiar man said. And it looks like Potter's waking up. Good, the little bundle of evil said, sounding pleased. Let's hurry this up, Crouch. It wouldn't do for any of my less loyal servants to see my rebirth. Crouch. That was it. He'd first seen this man in person exactly one lifetime ago when he was so busy alternatively pressing for details about Voldemort's return and trying to kill him that he'd neglected to take his polyjuice. Of course, my master, Crouch Jr. bowed before picking little Voldemort up. Harry watched quietly as Crouch almost reverently unwrapped his master, revealing what was still the ugliest baby he had ever seen. It actually looked like one of those hybrids straight from out of a Greek myth with its lack of hair, undersized appendages, scaly skin, lack of a proper nose, and to top it off, the creature was a reddish black. In short, it was a very ugly, very snake-like, very possessed child. Crouch gently lowered Voldemort into the cauldron, a look of utter devotion and slight insanity on his face. Of course, Harry might be biased, but how could anyone looking so thrilled about carrying that possibly be sane? Bone of the father, unknowingly given, you will renew your son. Crouch said, raising his wand and pointing it in Harry's general direction. Harry watched as the surface around his feet cracked and a fine trail of dust floated up into the air and landed gently in the cauldron. The water immediately started hissing as it sent sparks in all directions and turned a vibrant, deadly-looking blue. Harry hoped that was how the ritual was supposed to go, because otherwise Sirius's plan of switching the bones out would be for naught and he would probably need all the help he could get. Crouch was looking almost eager now as he pulled out a long silver dagger from his cloak. Flesh of the servant, willingly given, you will revive your master, he said before casually lopping off his left hand. Once the severed flesh made contact with the concoction, it turned a bright red. True to his image as fanatic, Crouch didn't even scream, but he did pause to cast a spell to staunch the bleeding before beginning to approach Harry. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe, Crouch said, kneeling beside Harry. Harry knew that intent was very important in spellcasting and made a split-second decision to try to further weaken Voldemort's new body. He subtly shifted his body closer to the dagger than Crouch was bringing down on him. How's that for forcibly taken? He kind of needed the ritual to succeed in order to be able to destroy the Horcrux in himself relatively safely, after all. Harry winced, but didn't cry out. It wouldn't do to look pathetic when Crouch, insane or not, hadn't made a sound when losing his hand. Oh God, couldn't you have at least cleaned that or something? Harry couldn't help asking, wrinkling his nose in distaste. He hadn't been planning on taunting Voldemort until after the ritual was complete, but this was extremely unsanitary. Crouch rolled his eyes. Don't complain, Potter. You're getting a chance to partake in a ritual to bring back the greatest wizard who ever lived. It's an honor many would die for. As a matter of fact, it's an honor you will die for. Did something happen to Dumbledore? Harry asked innocently. Crouch ignored that and held out a vial to catch droplets of Harry's blood. You're about to have bigger problems than an infection, little boy. Once Crouch deemed he'd collected enough blood, he hurried back to Voldemort's side and carefully poured the blood in. Instantly the liquid in the cauldron turned such a blinding white that it was difficult to make out anything else. All too soon, the light show was over and a thick pillar of smoke billowed from the cauldron. When the mist cleared, Harry got to see firsthand the results of the ritual as the dark outline of a tall and emaciated-looking man emerged from the cauldron. Robe me, Voldemort demanded, apparently too triumphant to be bothered to do it himself. Or possibly he never bothered and always relied on his minions. It was kind of disturbing either way. Crouch nodded curtly. Right away, my lord. He bent down, picked up the black robes that Voldemort had been using as swaddling clothes not 10 minutes before, shook them out, and pulled them one-handed over his master's head. Voldemort scarcely paid this any attention as he only had eyes for Harry. Harry stared back, wondering what he was supposed to do until the Death Eaters showed up. He really hoped Voldemort wasn't about to start monologuing again. He had been too traumatized last time to say anything, but he really didn't care about the family history of the man who had murdered his parents. He cared even less this time now that he already knew the story. You look like a snake, Harry offered at last. Voldemort looked faintly pleased. Indeed. Such a noble animal. What do you think? He asked Crouch. The resemblance is uncanny, Crouch said loyally. Voldemort turned his attention to his brand new body as if searching for the resemblance. In the course of his inspection, he drew a wand and pointed it at Crouch. The supposedly dead Death Eater was lifted off the ground and hurled against Harry's headstone. Crouch didn't react to that, either, but he did quickly scramble to his feet. Hold out your arm, Voldemort ordered. Obediently, Crouch rolled up his sleeves and presented both of them to the newly revived madman. Voldemort carefully eyed the dark mark. They will be here soon and then we can hear their excuses. Voldemort spun suddenly to face Harry. You stand, Harry Potter, upon the remains of my late father, he announced. A muggle and a fool, very like your dear mother. My mother was a witch, Harry pointed out. And from what I understand, you only ever met your father on the day you killed him. Whatever his faults, it really wasn't his fault your mother dosed him with a love potion and deluded herself into believing he really loved her. After that kind of enslavement, of course he left. If he'd stayed, she might have done it again. Crucio. Voldemort said, stabbing his wand at Harry. Harry bit his tongue so hard it started to bleed, but managed not to cry out. Oh, real mature, he said, turning his head and spitting out the blood. My mother did not dose my father with love potions. She told him she was a witch and he left. He returned to his muggle parents before I was even born and she died giving birth to me, leaving me alone to be raised in a muggle orphanage during the worst depression in living memory. He could have found me, should have found me, but he did nothing. Nonetheless, I took vengeance on that fool who gave me his name, Tom Riddle. Voldemort trailed off. Harry knew he really should quit while he was ahead, but all he could think about were the people Voldemort would go on to kill if he wasn't stopped here. 2 of them were hidden somewhere in this very graveyard, even. How was he supposed to find you if your mother just disappeared? Harry asked reasonably. And since your father left before you were born, it was really your mother who gave you his name. Seriously, you could have just changed it. Starting a war because of your daddy issues, kind of lame. And why on earth are you advertising your status as half-blood, anyway? Doesn't that kind of go across your message of pure-blood supremacy? That earned Harry another crucio, but he swore it was worth it. Listen to me, reliving family history, Voldemort mused. One would almost think I was growing sentimental. If one didn't know you were a raging sociopath, Harry muttered. Voldemort ignored him in favor of watching the arrival of his minions. Harry could only hope Fred and Cedric had gotten back far enough as to not be in the way as they were suddenly surrounded by Death Eaters. Harry had seen more than enough of full-grown men bowing and scraping to the psychopath before him and automatically tuned the groveling and I knew you'd be back. Harry jolted back to attention as a stinging hex was fired at him. Pay attention, Crouch hissed. Harry noticed he had a nice new silver hand. Harry would bet this ghostly appendage wouldn't end up strangling the man it was attached to. And speaking of, he still wasn't even remotely glad he'd saved Pettigrew. Yes, that moment of weakness and deception-sensing hand might have let them escape, but if it hadn't been for him, Voldemort might not have come back so soon. Although his current predicament suggested he might have found a way. And sure enough, Voldemort was done terrorizing his servants for the moment and had returned his attention to Harry. Harry Potter has kindly joined us for my rebirthing party, Voldemort was saying. One might go so far as to call him my guest of honor. Guest of honor? Harry repeated. I think this just goes on to further prove that Riddle here can't actually distinguish between allies and enemies. There was a dead silence as the Death Eaters stood frozen in shock that someone would dare speak to their master like that. It was a good thing Bellatrix wasn't there, she would probably have tried to kill him. Crucio, Voldemort cast again. Harry idly wondered how many times the Longbottoms had undergone that curse before snapping and hoped he wouldn't find out. Don't call me that, Potter. What else am I supposed to call you? Harry demanded when the curse was let up. You know who? He who must not be named. The Dark Lord. I'm not a Death Eater and I've met you before, so I have no desire to use any of those appellations. What about my chosen name? Voldemort replied. No one would actually tell me what that was, and Dumbledore always called you Riddle, Harry lied apologetically. Voldemort introduced. I believe that everyone should know the name of the man that kills them. I'll make sure to do that, Harry said agreeably. Master, we crave to know, we beg you to tell us, how you have achieved this miracle, how you managed to return to us. Lucius simpered as he figured he was the least likely person there besides Crouch, who already knew, to get crucioed for asking. Ah, what a story it is, Lucius, said Voldemort. And it begins and ends with my young friend here. You know, of course, that they have called this boy my downfall. You all know that on the night I lost my powers and my body, I tried to kill him. His mother died in the attempt to save him, and unwittingly provided him with a protection I admit I had not foreseen. I could not touch the boy. He raised one of his long white fingers and put it very close to Harry's cheek. His mother left upon him the trace's other sacrifice. This is old magic, I should have remembered it, I was foolish to overlook it, but no matter. I can touch him now. Harry felt the cold tip of the long white finger touch him, and thought his head would burst with the pain. That's quite an accomplishment, he managed to say. Of course, everyone else save Quirrell managed it just fine, but way to aspire to such mediocrity. Voldemort just chuckled darkly and began to explain his journey from the night he failed to kill Harry to where he was now. And then, not even a year ago, when I had almost abandoned hope, it happened at last, a witch stumbled onto me. She was foolish and flighty and had suffered some brain damage as the result of an overzealous memory charm. In short, she was perfect. Perfect to possess, perfect to free my loyal servant. He nodded at Crouch. Bertha Jorkins. She had never been so useful in her life. She was traveling in Albania and passed through my forest alone. Her body did not last long and her mind lasted even less, but I got what I needed, passage back to Britain and the knowledge that a loyal servant was within my grasp. Bartemius Crouch may have denied me at his trial, but years of enslavement first in Azkaban and then in his own home by his own father hardened his resolve and turned him into someone whose loyalty to me is absolute. Dear Bertha arrived at the Crouch house one day and encountered a house elf and Crouch. Crouch Sr. panicked and cast the strongest memory charm he could on the girl. When I broke it, she was lost to me, but no matter. I went to the Crouch house and I retrieved my servant. So that was how it was. Crouch had been freed because of Bertha again. He didn't know why he was so surprised. After all, he hadn't seen any of the major players in that little drama aside from Voldemort before the Quidditch Cup. Voldemort stepped in front of Harry, apparently done with his little speech for now. And here he is, the boy you all had thought to be my downfall. Crucio. That was, what, 4 times that night? He went through too many more and he wouldn't be able to help screaming. He waited a moment after Voldemort let up in order to make sure he could keep his voice steady before saying, yes, you can torture an unarmed and restrained opponent. Clearly this proves you're better than me. Of course, I've never gotten my ass handed to me by an infant, but I'm sure that's not as absurd as it sounds. Voldemort's eyes narrowed into angry slits. I want there to be no mistake in anybody's mind. Harry Potter escaped me by a lucky chance. And I am now going to prove my power by killing him, here and now, in front of you all, when there is no Dumbledore to help him, and no mother to die for him. I will give him his chance. He will be allowed to fight, and you will be left with no doubt which of us is stronger. Untie him, Crouch, and give him back his wand. As you wish, Master, Crouch said, pointing his own wand at Harry. The ropes attaching Harry to the gravestone loosened and fell away. Catch, he said, tossing Harry Cedric's wand. Harry caught it nimbly and stooped up slowly, discreetly using the headstone for support. After 4 crucios, Harry was pretty shaking on his feet. It's a good thing he wasn't the one who had to be responsible for taking care of Nagini or he'd be seriously screwed. You have been taught how to duel, Harry Potter? Voldemort asked softly. I've been taught to drop my wand and summon snakes, Harry replied. Our dueling club was kind of substandard. Do you at least know you're supposed to bow to each other? Voldemort asked. Harry shrugged. I don't think we really got around to that, no. Well, come now, the niceties must be observed. Dumbledore would like you to show some manners. Bow to death, Harry, Voldemort coaxed. I'll bow to death only after it bows to me, Harry said firmly. I said, bow. Voldemort raised his wand and Harry felt his spine start to curve. Harry threw himself to the ground. Granted, that didn't stop the Death Eater's laughter of Voldemort's amusement, but he did not bow to the man who had killed so many of the people that he loved. Then, of course, he had to climb back to his feet, which was a daunting prospect indeed. He managed it, but not nearly as quickly as he would have liked. I see living with muggles has left you tragically bereft of manners, Voldemort shook his head ruefully. Not that I'm surprised, of course. Still, you might well be able to face me, straight-backed and proud, the way your father died. And now, we duel. Crucio. As Harry underwent the Cruciator's curse for the 5th time that night and was seriously wishing he'd taken whoever's suggestion of just throwing a rock at the damn cup. When the curse was lifted, Harry was appalled to discover he'd cried out. Still, 1 in 5 wasn't too bad, he supposed. That hurt, didn't it, Harry? Voldemort taunted. You don't want me to do it again, do you? Harry didn't reply, trying to keep focused. I asked whether you want me to do that again, Voldemort said softly. Imperio. Fine, Harry snapped. I clearly must on some level or I'd stop provoking you. That was not what anyone was expecting and there was nothing but silence as the crows tried to process the fact that a 14-year-old had just broken Voldemort's imperious curse. Well, Voldemort said quietly. Who am I to deny a dying man his last request? He raised his wand again but Harry managed to throw himself behind the headstone he'd been tied to earlier. The stone cracked as Voldemort's Crucio hit it and Harry winced. He took out his mirror. Sirius, I need you, he whispered. Harry? Sirius whispered back. We're ready to mobilize. Where are you? George said Fred and Cedric are with you. Are they alive? I'm in the graveyard, Harry answered. Cedric and Fred are somewhere but I haven't seen them in a while. They should be fine. Hurry. Chapter 49. Master. I'm being attacked. Nagini hissed. Voldemort stiffened. Attacked? Who would dare dash? Looks like Fred and Cedric were making their move. Only one thing to do. Harry took a deep breath. Even though he'd already survived death, well, a few times, really, that didn't mean that he was looking forward to sacrificing himself on purpose. Although the fact he was choosing now to try and keep focus off of Cedric and Fred should mean that they'd be protected once he got back, right? That was how it worked before, at any rate. Of course, then he really thought he'd stay dead but it was entirely possible that Voldemort would use the killing curse and he'd either stay a Horcrux or stay dead. Oh, who was he kidding? Voldemort had only ever shown himself capable of using the 3 unforgivable curses around him. Although he might have used something else that one time he was fighting Dumbledore in the Ministry. 2 boys, Master, they dashed Nagini abruptly cut off with a hiss of pain. She was either dead or would be soon. Quit stalling, Harry mentally ordered himself. Reluctantly, he stepped out from behind his stone shield. You can't kill me. I can try, Voldemort said simply, raising his wand. Avada Kedavra. Harry looked around him idly. He was at King's Cross again. Why couldn't I be more creative than using a train station as a metaphor for being at a crossroads? Harry murmured. I don't know, but personally I blame your mother, a voice said from behind him. A true marauder would never be that unoriginal. Harry spun around and came face to face with a man who looked very much how he would look in a few years sans the bright green eyes. Oh, and you might want to be aware of the fact that you're naked, James Potter said helpfully. Harry glanced down. So he was. Of course, the moment he became aware of that, he was in robes. Why did he need to be naked in the first place? Honestly. Original as far as infantile pranks go, maybe, a girl said. Harry glanced over and saw Lily Potter. But you never were one for symbolism. Can't we just blame your relatives for not believing in creativity and attempting to stifle it in our son? James implored. I refuse to admit a relation to that man, Lily insisted, crossing her arms. Petunia's just scared and should never, ever under any circumstances ever have been placed in charge of a magical child. The son, well, he'll probably grow up sooner or later. Mom? Dad? Harry could hardly believe it. Who are you expecting? Dumbledore? James asked with a sardonic smirk. Hate to break it to you, kid, but he's not quite dead in this timeline yet. Harry's eyes widened. This timeline? Then, you know. Harry, we're dead. And possibly just manifestations of your subconscious mind, Lily said gently. Of course we know. And Harry asked, wondering what their verdict would be on all of this. I couldn't be more proud, James said beaming. Aside from that Luna girl and Sirius, who really doesn't count because he also came back, no one knows about the whole time travel thing and you've done an admirable job to create chaos. Lily nudged him. Oh, and help people. That was good, too. While I may not strictly approve of all the willful mayhem, Lily said. Or just up and leaving your original timeline, the fact that you're trying to end everything now before people start dying is admirable and I hope you succeed. I didn't meant to come back, Harry pointed out. I wasn't really thinking, it was like I was compelled to. And once I got here, I had no idea how to go back so I just figured I might as well make the best of it. Really my school days, though, I swear, I might have fun sometimes, but I don't recommend trying it. Repeating your schooling is one of the most tedious things I have ever encountered. If I didn't try to liven things up, God knows I would have gone mad by now. That's assuming you're not mad already, Lily said. Harry shrugged. True. But as long as I'm not violently insane, I suppose it doesn't matter. Mental stability's overrated anyway. Here. James cheered. Tell Sirius that I don't blame him for picking Peter to be our secret keeper, will you? Yeah, that turned out to be a really stupid idea, but Lily and I were the ones to agree to it in the end, so. I will, Harry said solemnly. He's still a horrible influence, though. And tell Severus I forgive him, Lily requested. If I call him Severus he's likely to hex me but, alright, Harry agreed. I still don't see what you see in him, James said, shaking his head ruefully. He was my best friend for years, Lily reminded him. And even if the prophecy getting out was all his fault, we would have been in danger anyway. Not that much danger, James countered. Besides, he was a Death Eater. Was being the operative word, Lily told him. He's still alive, but God knows he hasn't been acting like it for 13 years now. He's back on the right side and needs to move past this. I'm hoping my forgiveness will help. Yeah, I suppose if he died I might have to see him more, James mused. Let's hope that doesn't happen for a while. I have to go back soon, don't I? Harry asked. Lily nodded. Stay here too long and you'll lose the opportunity. Thank you for protecting me, Harry said sincerely. Lily smiled softly at him. We're your parents, Harry. That's what parents do. We'll keep watching over you, James promised. After all, we love you, you're rather entertaining, and we really have nothing better to do. Now do us all a favor and go kick Voldemort's ass. I'll try not to disappoint, Harry said dryly. When Harry came to, he felt sore all over. Granted, he was already sore from those 5 Crucios, but his body felt like he'd been struck with 5 more while unconscious. Or was it while he was dead? That very well could be the case. My lord, Crouch was saying. Are you all right? I'm fine, Voldemort insisted. Harry chanced a glance over at the snake man and saw him rise to his feet. How about Potter? Is he dead? Harry hoped he could move quickly enough or stun Voldemort enough to do what he needed to do. He sat up and turned his wand on Voldemort. You wish. Voldemort's eyes widened. Pot dash. Harry distantly heard the telltale cracks of apparition but he ignored them in favor of crying out, Avada Kedavra. He wasn't the only one to say it and a jolt of green light struck Voldemort from the front and the back. As Voldemort fell, Harry locked eyes with his godfather, who slowly lowered his wand. Took you long enough, Harry greeted him. You're the one who wouldn't call for backup until Voldemort had gone and gotten himself reborn, Sirius countered. True, Harry agreed. His eyes felt heavy and his head was swimming. While he knew that passing out in a graveyard full of Death Eaters and, he supposed, auras about to go at it was probably not one of his better ideas, those Crucios and that Avada Kedavra were really starting to take its toll on him. You better not let me die. When Harry woke up, he was back at Hogwarts in the hospital wing. He sighed. And I had so hoped to avoid this place. Then maybe you shouldn't have gone and faced down with Voldemort, George said from the next bed over. What are you doing here? Harry asked, confused. George shrugged. Damned if I know. I didn't even get to go with you. They said it was because of the maze but I noticed that Fleur and Crumb don't need to be here. Where's Cedric? And Fred? Are they all right? Harry asked, concerned. We're right here, Fred said. He and Cedric were on beds on the opposite side of Harry. What's the last thing you remember? Passing out, Harry replied succinctly. And seeing as how I was unconscious after that, I'm not quite sure what else I'm supposed to be remembering. Good point, Fred admitted. So do you want to know what happened? That would be nice, Harry confirmed. Let me start by saying that you have got to be the craziest person I've ever met, Cedric said. Voldemort was coming back to life and crucioing you every time you turned around and you would not stop taunting him. I have no regrets, Harry insisted, crossing his arms. You never do, Cedric sighed. Although maybe if you had let up just a little, you wouldn't have passed out. Fred and I made sure to put to use that charm you showed us earlier, the Muffliato. We weren't sure what it did, but we figured it must have been some sort of modified silencing charm that let us hear each other to communicate while not letting other people hear us if you were willing to admit we were there while insisting we remained invisible. Harry nodded. Anyone else who got close to you would just hear a sort of buzzing, and unless they were trying to hear what you were saying, which they wouldn't have been since you were invisible, they wouldn't even notice. So Cedric and I weren't sure if we should intervene when you got stunned and that Crouch guy was doing some sort of ritual, but you didn't really seem all that concerned and we were looking for that snake. It would have been a lot easier if Cedric hadn't have been on the verge of a panic attack. Fred started to say. You try and shake off a year of conditioning that fast, Cedric interrupted. Besides, I could see a lot of sense in Harry's suggestion to run like hell. You know, seeing sense in anything Harry says doesn't speak very highly of your mental state, George noted. In my defense, a Death Eater was trying to bring back Voldemort and then more Death Eaters showed up, Cedric said defensively. Just keep telling yourself that, Fred said patronizingly. You know, I would probably be a lot more offended if that weren't true. Harry spoke up. But since it is true, you don't really care? Cedric asked. Harry shrugged. Not really. But go on. What happened after you saw the ritual? Death Eaters were apparating all around us, Fred continued. One of them appeared not 6 inches away from us and really freaked us out, so we quickly moved back a little. We saw the snake, but it was right by Voldemort and so we didn't want to risk it. After Voldemort started explaining his epic quest to kill a teenager, the snake slithered off, and so when everyone was distracted by that duel, Cedric and I stabbed it to death and then Cedric cut off its head for good measure. Good thinking, Harry said. When Voldemort was bodiless, he apparently tied his life force to Nagini in order to make himself stronger and tie him to the physical world using some obscure ritual, so in order to kill him, the snake had to go. Are you saying we were partially responsible for killing Voldemort? Cedric looked stunned. Indeed, Harry nodded. That should get you extra credit on your Dada Newt if nothing else. We're lucky your godfather showed up when he did, Fred told him. He must have brought 24 auras or so. Once the anti-apparition wards went up, the Death Eaters didn't stand a chance. Did anyone get away? Harry asked, concerned. Just one, Fred answered. I don't know who it was, though. Ah, Harry, my boy, you're awake? Fudge asked as he strolled into the hospital wing. Rita Skeeter, Dumbledore, Sirius, and Snape were with him. Yes, sir, Harry nodded. Maybe you can help clear up some of this confusion about this so-called return of he who must not be named, Fudge said hopefully. I think it's obvious what happened, sir. Barty Crouch Jr. was driven insane by the Dementors and somehow managed to escape Azkaban. Since he's supposed to be dead, he probably had help and you should question him on that. He tried to do a dangerous, obscure, and probably illegal ritual to summon Voldemort's spirit back to this world in a makeshift body. The ritual heavily depended on a snake named Nagini, which Cedric and Fred managed to kill. Crouch brought me there for Voldemort to kill, but fortunately my godfather and I managed to destroy it. Then, the fact that I'm here now means that our wonderfully competent auras took care of any others who showed up to see if Crouch's delusions had any basis in fact. Can I quote you on that? Rita asked eagerly. Harry nodded. That's my official statement and I won't be saying anything more on the matter until I've recovered. Faux Voldemort crucioed me 5 times, you know. Fudge winced at that. Well, it's a good thing you're alright and that monstrosity was put down and the escaped Death Eater caught. I need to go deal with the fallout now, but first, who actually won the Penta-Wizard playoffs? I need to give out the winnings and make an announcement. It was a tie, Harry explained. Fred, Cedric, and I all touched it at the same time and that's how we got transported to the graveyard. Crouch Jr. must have made it a portkey, although I have no idea how he managed to do that. About that, Fudge looked a little awkward. Turns out he'd been using Polyjuice to replace his father all year. Since he was busy with his little ritual, tonight he sent his father under an imperious curse to be a judge. It looks like it's wearing off, so we should be able to question him about his involvement soon enough. Normally, there would be a presentation ceremony, but under the circumstance. With that, he tossed a bag of galleons at Harry and left, Rita hurrying after him. Harry, why did you tell Minister Fudge that wasn't really Voldemort? Dumbledore asked reprovingly. Because even if Voldemort got killed relatively quickly, the fact he came back once could mean that he could come back again, and since the last thing Fudge wants to do is be known as the minister who let Voldemort come back, there's no way he would ever admit it. It's better to give him a nice public-friendly version than to have him try and destroy our credibility, Harry replied matter-of-factly. But Voldemort can come back and once more he will, Dumbledore said, looking older than he normally did. Actually, Professor, you'll find that he won't, Harry corrected. I know all about his Horcruxes. When I fought the diary him in the chamber, I showed it to Sirius and he recognized it as a Horcrux. My family was always rather dark, Sirius piped up. We decided that even he wouldn't be so careless with his soul as to hand it off to Wormtail for safekeeping, so there might be more. It took some time, but we eventually managed to get Hufflepuff's cup from Bellatrix's vault, Slytherin's locket from my house dash. You had one of the Dark Lord's Horcruxes in your house? Snape interjected skeptically. Sirius shrugged. I already mentioned my family was dark. But in this case, my brother found out about them, turned on Voldemort, and took it, but he died before figuring out how to destroy them. How did you manage to destroy them? Dumbledore asked, intrigued. Fiendfire, mostly, but we did use a bit of the basilisk venom Harry got from the chamber, Sirius replied. We found Ravenclaw's diadem hidden here at Hogwarts and Slytherin's ring at Voldemort's maternal family's house not too far from that graveyard. Then it was Harry's turn. I suspected Nagini might be one, so I had Fred and Cedric kill it, and I realized I was one as well, so while I was fully prepared to give my life to see Voldemort destroyed, the fact that he used my blood to bring himself back meant that he anchored me to this world while destroying his own Horcrux. You died? Sirius looked alarmed. I told you I was going to, Harry pointed out. Yeah, but still, I have got to be the worst guardian ever. Sirius said mournfully. There is very little you could do to make you worse than my previous guardians, Harry tried to comfort him. Considering they kept you in a cupboard, that's really not saying much. Sirius shot back. Well, while I was dead I met my parents, Harry told him. My dad said he didn't blame you, and even if you suggested Pettigrew, he and Mum had the final say. Then Mum said that you're still a horrible influence and to tell someone named Severus that she forgave him and that since he was still alive he should start acting like it. Oh, and Dad said that he wanted him to stay alive, too, if only so he wouldn't have to deal with him. Snape blinked at that but said nothing. Not that Harry really expected him to. Your mum said I was a horrible influence. Sirius brightened at the thought. I've still got it. These revelations are quite surprising, Dumbledore said. Why didn't you tell me about your Horcrux hunt? I was afraid that if I did you might shut me out because of my age, and I felt it was something I needed to take care of on my own, Harry replied, semi-honestly. Sirius and I had it covered, and if we needed help, we would have asked for it. Besides, you had the same starting information that we did, so you were free to make the Horcrux connection and start looking for them yourself independent of us. I see, Dumbledore said. I'll need to see the two of you in my office to see what our next move is, he told Snape and Sirius. Once the three of them left, George said casually, so, about those winnings. You can have my share if you make me a partner in the joke shop you start with it, Harry said immediately. What? Fred looked gobsmacked. That's over 300 galleons. Positive, Harry said. I should make at least a third of that selling my exclusive anyway. Cedric appeared to be thinking something over. Finally, he said, me too. George looked at him uncomprehendingly. You too? You can have my share, too. I don't really need the money as we've got another year of schooling, and so long as I can be a partner in your shop and see a return on my investment when you guys are wildly successful, which everyone knows you will be, then it will be worth it, Cedric said firmly. Besides, after tonight I think that's exactly what everyone needs. Thank you, Fred said, accepting the bag of galleons Harry held out to him. How can we ever repay you? George asked. By making us ridiculously wealthy when you make it big, Harry replied. And not using us as test subjects, Cedric added. And not letting your mum kill us too much for this, Harry finished. We make no promises, Fred smirked. Chapter 50. Death Eater plot to revive you-know-who foiled by Potter. By Rita Skeeter. The third task of the Pentawizard playoffs proved to be something to behold, and it did not disappoint. What no one expected was the after-playoff entertainment. Bartemius Crouch Jr., not quite so dead as his father would have us believe, abducted champions Harry Potter, Fred Weasley, and Cedric Diggory from inside the third task maze with the intention of sending us back to the terror of 13 years ago. Crouch attempted to use these boys in an elaborate and insidious ritual to bring back he who must not be named. Fortunately, the ritual merely produced a golem who was quickly brought down by the combined efforts of Potter and Sirius Black. While Weasley and Diggory were off destroying the snake that the ritual used to keep the golem alive, Potter called for reinforcements on his two-way mirror, and Black, eager to make up for his stunning failure as a guardian until 2 years ago, delivered in the form of 24 auras. Needless to say, the Ministry's finest had no problem rounding up those who still secretly wished to serve you-know-who and came to see if Crouch could really revive him. He couldn't. How, you might ask, did Crouch get to be in such a position as to kidnap some of Hogwarts' best students and drawing he who must not be named's old followers to his side as he attempted a bit of ill-fated necromancy when he is supposed to be dead himself? Interesting question with an even more interesting answer. Crouch Jr.'s mother died shortly after he did many years ago, or so we thought. It turns out that while she did indeed die, she did not do it in her home but in Azkaban prison. Knowing she was dying and her husband would do anything for her, the late Mrs. Crouch begged her husband to smuggle him out with polyjuice and died in his place. As Crouch Jr. was undoubtedly a Death Eater, Crouch Sr. kept him under the Imperious curse until one day Jr.'s resistance became so great that he overpowered his father and started off on his mad quest to bring back his Dark Master. Crouch Sr. is facing charges for his actions, and Azkaban prison is increasing their security after 2 people have escaped, one of which left completely unnoticed. The arrested Death Eaters turned out to be, much to everyone's surprise and horror, seemingly respectable members of our community who had faced accusations of Death Eater activity in the past but either bribed the previous, clearly corrupt administration or pleaded being under the Imperious curse. As Lucius Malfoy, a true victim of the Imperious curse back in the day, put it truly saddens me that so many people that I had counted as friends could take advantage of my suffering and the suffering of others like me similarly affected by that dreadful curse to escape prison and then turn right around and take the first opportunity to seek out their master. Continued on page 5. Unbelievable, Harry said, shaking his head and putting the newspaper down. How does your father always manage to land on his feet, Draco? Once again, it was the end of the year feast and Harry was seeking solace with the Slytherins. I don't know what you mean, Harry, Draco said cheerfully. But I agree with him, war is such a terrible thing and aren't we lucky to have avoided it? Oh, whatever, Harry huffed. I saw him in that graveyard, you know. Really? Draco drawled. I thought you said they were all wearing masks and you can't possibly have spent enough time with my father to be able to accurately pick out his voice among others during such a time of duress. The golem called him Lucius, Harry protested. How would a golem know? Draco asked reasonably. And if he was there he would be in custody, simple as that. Apparently one escaped, Harry pointed out. I'm not sure how, though, since the auras put up anti-apparition wards pretty quickly. Maybe whoever it was carrying around a portkey, Draco suggested. Mum always insists that all of us have one on us at all times although it doesn't work within the castle. So you're suggesting that someone else just happened to be carrying around a portkey like your father does? Harry asked skeptically. We both know it was him. Good luck proving it, Draco said with a smirk. So why won't anyone else talk to me? Harry wondered. Apparently I'm still not allowed, Blaise replied dryly. Don't encourage him, Daphne said absently. See? Blaise cried. The subject matter bores me, Pansy sniffed. You got my father arrested, Theodore Knott said, looking at Harry like he was stupid. Then again, that's how he usually looked at Harry so he wasn't concerned. I did not. Harry insisted. He got himself arrested by appearing at a madman's side who was trying to kill me and since Crouch summoned everyone through his dark mark, everyone caught was obviously a Death Eater, no matter what their bank account has to say about it. That is true, Theodore acknowledged. But it's still a bad situation and I never liked you to begin with. But we've been through so much together. Harry objected. Most of it your fault and all of it annoying, Theodore reminded him. Excuse me, Fleur's voice sounded from behind him. Harry turned around to see Victor Crumb was with her. Vive would like to congratulate you on your victory, Victor told him. Even though Vive wish we could have won, I am sure that whatever happened in the graveyard more than earned you your victory. Thanks, Harry said, touched. How did Beauxbatons and Durmstrang take it? They did not take the fact that all three Hogwarts champions won very well, Fleur admitted. Which is why we are seeking you out as everyone else is packing. Well, that's nice of you, Harry told her. It was great meeting you guys this year and I'm warning you now that if you don't keep in touch, I'm going to have to personally come to France and or Bulgaria and visit you. Fleur and Crumb exchanged horrified glances. We'll keep in touch, Crumb promised. Yes, most definitely. Fleur agreed. The two champions practically ran from the Great Hall. Strange. Attention everyone, Dumbledore said, standing up and waiting for the Great Hall to quiet down. Before I go ahead and release the point totals, Professor Lockhart has an announcement to make. Why is he even still here? Harry wondered. Draco shrugged. Free publicity, I'm guessing. Thank you, Professor Dumbledore, Lockhart said, beaming at everyone. First off, I would like to say that this has been an amazing year. Being back here, seeing how much you've grown, it's been a wonderful experience. To be honest, I was a bit hesitant about being a headmaster because I've only had 1 year of teaching experience though I was certainly more than qualified. Young Harry was very persistent, however, and I'm glad he was as it was a truly rewarding experience for me. That's why I'd like to announce that as of right now, the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness will be accepting transfer requests and I hope to see some of you next year. Thank you, Professor Lockhart, or should I say headmaster? Dumbledore asked rhetorically. Next, I am pleased to announce that our very own Professor Moody has agreed to stay on and teach another year to prove that there is no such thing as a curse on the position and to rid me of a long-term staffing woe. And finally, the point tallies. As things stand, Hufflepuff is in 4th place with 867. Ravenclaw is in 3rd place with 916 points. Slytherin is in 2nd with 1037 points and Gryffindor, of course, is in the lead with 1177 points. Of course. I love it how he's not even pretending to be objective anymore, Draco muttered. Stupid blatant favoritism. I'm just as outraged as you are, Harry assured him. Of course, due to recent events, I am going to award Hufflepuff 500 points for their champion Cedric Diggory winning the Penta-Wizard playoffs and 1,000 points to Gryffindor for Harry and Fred Weasley for having done the same, Dumbledore announced. That brings Hufflepuff up to 2nd place with 1367 points and Gryffindor still in 1st with 2,177 points. Why is it that Gryffindor wins every year with last-minute Harry-related points and Ravenclaw and now Hufflepuff have benefited from association with his deeds, but Slytherin never gets anything despite Harry spending more time with us than he does with any member of another house besides Luna Lovegood? Blaise complained. Harry opened his mouth to reply, but Daphne beat him to it. Blaise! You're encouraging him again, she hissed. Oh, for the love of Dash. So just between us, Voldemort actually came back and you killed him, right? Neville asked once they were on the train ride home. Harry smirked. Totally. What? Hermione looked startled. You killed someone? But you're only 14. Think of the irreparable damage this will surely do to your soul. Harry held up a hand to stop her. Hermione, this is Lord Tom Riddle Voldemort we're talking about. He kind of had it coming. Besides, he was already mostly dead. I'm fairly certain you already used that reference, Luna told him. Harry shuddered. How unoriginal. In my defense, though, I was talking about the same person and it was 2 years ago. Then how do you even remember that? Ron wanted to know. Harry turned to stare at him incredulously. Because The Princess Bride is one of the most epic movies ever. How could I not remember it? Ginny snorted. Since when do you care about epic? You put off doing anything until Voldemort himself showed up. At least I did something then, Harry defended himself. And I didn't have to. I could have just called Sirius immediately and have had the Aurors deal with it. For all I know, that's exactly what happened, Ginny pointed out. Since you released such a Chamber of Secrets version to the press. What does she mean Chamber of Secrets version, Harry? Ron asked, frowning. Doctored beyond belief. Harry guessed silently. Out loud he said, presumably epic since that was what my defeat of the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets was. I have very rarely seen its match, Ginny swore. And it's not like I escaped unscathed, Harry told them. My psychic, Parselmouth scar took an Avada Kedavra for me. You got hit with an Avada Kedavra? Hermione cried. No, Harry shook his head. My scar did. Don't you listen? Never mind, Hermione said, deciding once again that it simply wasn't worth it. So how put out are you that I won the playoffs? Harry asked Luna. Luna looked mystified for once. I was your representative on the panel of judges. Why in the world would I be upset? You consistently gave me a lower score than everyone but Victor? Harry offered. Only for caring more for showmanship than the tasks themselves, Luna reminded him. But as far as the maze goes, well, if that Sphinx is to believe you tried harder and really need to brush up on your basic riddles. You wouldn't have lasted 1 week in Ravenclaw if it took you 10 minutes to get glove. Yeah, well, no one asked you. Harry exclaimed. Luna raised her eyebrows. Really? Because I could have sworn you just did. Why couldn't you just tell what really happened, Harry? Hermione inquired. I mean, sure it would have been a bit scary to know that Voldemort has been out there all this time, but if he's gone now, why not put everyone's mind at ease? Neville laughed. Right, because telling everyone that someone that nearly everyone you meet who hasn't met him personally or taken classes with Sirius and basically been bribed is afraid to say the name of wasn't dead after all but wandering around doing God knows what for 13 years would go over well. What are they supposed to say? Yeah, he wasn't really dead last time, our bad, but this time he is, we swear. If losing one body wasn't enough, why would losing a second be any more lethal? Because of the Horcruxes, of course, Hermione began. I'm sure that if dash. Yeah, there's no way that bit of information is coming out, Harry said firmly. Strictly speaking, I probably shouldn't have even told you guys. Although I really don't remember why I saw fit to tell you guys that and not about Voldemort having actually been back. Raxperts, Luna suggested. Seriously, someone ought to do something about them, Harry said vehemently. Most people haven't even heard of Horcruxes because if people, especially unscrupulous people who have already killed, found out about such a convenient and relatively safe method for relative immortality, people would use it. Besides, the Ministry is very happy to keep Voldemort's return away from the public eye and the public is ecstatic not to be aware of what almost happened, so who am I to go against the will of the people? I'm not even going to answer that, Ginny said, shaking her head. At least she seemed more amused than hostile. So what are we going to do this summer, Sirius? Harry asked once he met his guardian on the platform. The same thing we do every summer, Harry, Sirius replied with a grin. Try to take over the world? Harry asked innocently. Yeah, that settles it. You two are not allowed to be left alone together, Remus declared. Harry looked over to see his backup godfather and Tonks standing a few feet away. Hey, what are you guys doing here? Didn't I just say I refuse to leave you two alone together? Remus asked. Well, yeah, Harry admitted. But you kind of made it sound like you just decided that. We never thought it was a good idea, Tonks explained. But our determination to keep the time you two spend alone to a bare minimum is new, yes. You never let me have any fun. Sirius sulked. Forgive me if I don't find taking over the world to be as thrilling as you two apparently do, Remus said dryly. Of course, Sirius said magnanimously. After all, you've never tried it. This is my best friend, Remus said despondently. There, Tonks said, patting Remus on the shoulder. At least you're not related to him. Are you guys sure you're not dating? Harry asked. They better not be, Sirius growled. Well, at least for another year or so. But after that I expect to see some sparks flying. You can't force us to date, Sirius, Remus felt compelled to remind him. No, Sirius agreed readily enough. But I can force you guys to hang out until your hormones overwhelm you and you have no choice. I feel so used, Remus complained. At least I'm awesome. Tonks consoled him, looking like she wouldn't mind not waiting. So Cedric, tell us about the graveyard, Marietta Edgecombe was saying. Cedric's eyes widened and he started breathing faster. God, Marietta, he's just been through a traumatic experience. Cho snapped. Show some respect. What did I do? Marietta wondered. Thank you so much for that, Cedric said sarcastically as he met Harry's eye. Hey, Harry protested. I saved your life. And I'm grateful, Cedric allowed, but I have never been more aware that people spend a ridiculous amount of time talking about the G-word until now. You can send me your therapy bill, Harry offered. It's probably tax deductible. Cedric rolled his eyes but moved on. Congratulations on your recent defeat of that golem, Narcissa Malfoy said as she, her husband, and her son approached him. Harry shivered. Thank you. And may I say that you terrify me far more than that golem did despite the 5 crucios. Narcissa blinked at him. Really, you do say the strangest things. That's because he's crazy, Draco added helpfully. So not helping, Harry snapped at him. We are grateful for the service you've done us all, Lucius claimed. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go commiserate with those poor unsuspecting family members of Death Eaters. Well, the Malfoys certainly knew how to keep themselves above the fray. Well, when they weren't caught red-handed at the Department of Mysteries, that is. Voldemort's really gone for good this time, Sirius said softly. I never thought I'd see the day. I did, Harry replied. Of course, it's a lot less bittersweet than before. James and Lily would be proud of you, Harry, Remus assured him. Harry smiled at him. Thanks, Remus. And then as they continued blissfully into this small but perfect piece of their forever, Harry knew that all was well. So, what's this about you funding the twins' pranks? Molly Weasley demanded, hands on her hips and looking murderous. Behind her, the twins were mouthing sorry at him, not looking even remotely sincere. I can explain, Harry said immediately. Please do, Molly said, her eyes flashing, and Harry was suddenly very much aware that this was the woman who, in another life, had taken down Bellatrix Lestrange.